Okay, this week you have a separate assignment, they call it an assignment 2, that you have to do in addition to your regular assignment. So this is for Unit 9. So if you go into Unit 9 and you click here, it says create a 10 to 15 page or point, excuse me, 10 to 15 slide presentation using PowerPoint based on the Bridge to the Profession. Okay? So first things first, here's the instructions, but let's go ahead and find this first. So if you go into the digital book, what you'll find is that it's actually on page, sorry about that, I've already opened it up earlier, so I had to refresh it. So if you go into chapter 8, you'll notice that it's not actually on page 472, but I want to click back a page, and I'm going to go to page, I think it's 471, the bridge to. So that's one issue with the digital book. That's one of the problems that we have with digital books and page numbers. It's kind of tricky. You can also find this information by going to chapter Unit 9, hitting Learning Activities, and then just clicking Bridge to Professional Activity, and you see that information here. So I went ahead and I copied and pasted this or actually printed it out so that I can see it easier. Let me get good. Sorry about that. Let me get to it. So let's first of all read it. You're pretending you're an auditor. Y'all are discussing a client's right to return of inventory. So, in other words, a company is selling products, and the customers have the right to return them if they don't like them. So, should those be sales or not? Since you've delivered it to the customer, you've done your part, but the customer still has the right to return. So what you got to do is you have to go into FASB, and we'll look at that in a second, and you have to click on, well, you have to find the authoritarian guidance. In other words, what does it say in GAAP? Then there's some other stuff. When is this guidance important? Sales with high rates of return can cause inventory to be stated. Why are returns allowed? You have to. So these are some of the answers, questions you have to answer. But one of the first thing is, what is the authoritarian guidance for this? So you're going to have to go to this website, right? To the GAAP website. All right. So let me go ahead and open it up. I'm going to go to that website. So I went ahead and got this. Here's the username you want to use. So I'll go here. The username is right there. I provided it to you in the announcement, and the student password. So I'll put those in already. So I'm going to go to FASB because we're not doing GASB. You gotta accept it as usual. Alright, so then you go into, well, there's two things you can look up. You can look up inventory, and you can look up sales, right? So is this revenue? Is this revenue or not? So both of those things you have to consider what it says in GAAP, okay? If you decide to use another source, like if you look at the textbook and see what it says, if you look online and see what it says, that's okay, but you can't use, you can use that as maybe a direction for what section to go in the code, but you can't like, for example, let's say you do a research in GAAP and you find that John Deere CPA feels this way about how revenue should be recognized and right of return. Well, that's fine, but you can't use that as a source. But John Deere cited, FASB, code blank, right? If that's the case, then you can, because of John Deere research, you can go find it directly if you want to do it that way. But you have to be careful. if you go about this way and you just go in here and start looking around and reading all this stuff, that works just as good. It just takes a little bit of time to get used to it. So if you go in, I don't know, let's say we go in here, we look into inventory, and I click on inventory, and I say, alright, let's go into overall, because none of these things seem to work for me. And then I go into initial measurement. Now this is not going to be the right thing for you, but it tells you about the initial measurement of inventory, and they talk about cost basis and all that stuff. If I was doing a paper and I wanted to use one of these, then you would want to use this is how you would want to reference it. So I would go into FASB, ASC, right? FASB, ASC 330, 1030, and that's my initial measurement. And if you use one of these, you could go, you actually go 30-1. So whichever one you decide to decided to use. So this would be this is your reference right here for that situation. Initial measure states this, and you're in the actual paper itself saying this. You don't do this as you don't have to put this at the end of the paper, or in this case PowerPoints, but at the end of the communication you put this in it, right? You say here's initial measures and it states this based on FASB ASC 330-1030-1. Okay? So this would be in the work itself, and this is the reference that you would want to use. Now here's something else. I do not want you to copy and paste this. Put it in your own words. I don't want you to quote it and reference it either. I don't want to, you reference it, but you don't quote it. You put it in your own words. I can find this stuff on my own. There's no point in, you copying and pasting it in a slide for me. You need to explain it in your own words. So the authoritative measure is, whatever it is, 330, 1030-1 or whatever, and it says this, and then you say it in your own words. That's very important as far as I'm concerned. Alright, so then we go to the instructions, and let's look at that so that we can see. These are let's go to the actual instructions that I printed out. This comes from our school's website, so if we click on View Instructions, it tells you what you need to do. 10 to 15 slides, not including the title and reference slide. Please put a title slide. I always want to see titles. Remember, it says page 472, but it could be on page 471. I showed you earlier how to find it either way. In conducting the okay, so we already went in conducting the interview part. So here's the instructions, and then for the rubric, this is how you're going to be graded. So first of all, you get points for identifying the guidance, right? So putting this information and explaining it too. You have to don't just put this information, you have to explain it in your own words. Then explain when revenue. So this is what FASB ASC blank 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 says about revenue recognition. Then explain when revenue recognition applies to inventory policies. Those are two different things. Then discuss the merits of industry-wide return policy. So that is not necessarily something that's in these questions, but it's in the rubric. So you need to address it. So in other words, why is it important that everybody uses the same rules? That's all they're saying. Why is it important that everybody uses the same rules? Discuss the merits of, I already did that. And identify the situation where reasonable estimates of returns may be difficult to accurately predict. In other words, they want you to think up an example of when a company might have a challenge estimating their returns. And it can be anything. Just give me the details of it. I thought of X type of company, and I don't want to give you one because I don't want to mess you up and get you stuck on one thing in your head and you can't get it out. So but you think of some industry, whatever it is, and I think this would be one example of one, and why. Make sure you use notes, right? What do I mean by that? Well, if I go in my PowerPoints, if you look at the bottom of the PowerPoint slides, it says click to add notes. I don't know if you can see it on this because, let me see if I can make it bigger. Yeah, there you go. So there's my slide. here's my notes to it. Slides are very bare bones, right? They're like the headlines in a newspaper. And the notes, you need to put the explanation, more detailed explanation that you would say if you were giving a presentation. So that's what notes are used for. So you're showing the slides, and then the notes tell you what you would actually say in the presentation. It doesn't have to be word for word, but it just has to be more detailed. So going back to so you won't get all 5 points if you don't put notes. And we already talked about proper citations. Alright, so some key elements of this, right? Make sure you find this in FASB codification. You can use other information, for example, discuss the merits of industry-wide return policies. You could use your textbook for that. But for this part right here, you got to use FASB codification. Do not copy and paste, and do not quote. So make it in your own words, type it out, whatever it is that you need. Make sure you add additional notes for explanations. Make sure you realize that the rubric is going to be used. If you do all that, I think you'll be fine.